Hi there, everybody. This is Jenny Clark again with Solvability, and we've got GovCon Summit 2021 with Russ Barnes in his session about programming yourself to succeed. And from the very first time that I met you, Russ, it was all about mindset and intention. And you're so serious about it. And I know I kind of go in circles, but you've gotten me on the straight and narrow, and I very much appreciate that. So, Russ, I'm just going to stand back and let you share some insight with us.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's here. Here's the problem. The problem is business is complex. And those of you who have been in business for a minute know that very clearly. There are so many things that you have to be concerned about on a daily basis, and it's hard to keep track. You know, many times you wake up in the morning, you're working hard, you're doing stuff all day long, and at the end of the day, you look back and wonder, what did I accomplish? Your team is working hard, and you're wondering, what have they done all day? That's the problem. Part of the problem is you have these feelings of uncertainty about the decisions you're making and whether they're going to pan out as you had expected that they would. There's a tremendous amount of feelings of being overwhelmed in all of the things that you have to do. And then at the end of the day, there's this anxiety and wondering if you're ever going to get to a point where you're living the lifestyle within the business that you intended when you started out. That goes for whether you're in business or whether in going into government contracting and going after federal contracts. It applies. Business is business. Entrepreneurial is being entrepreneurial, and it's really challenging. So as I started on my business career, it was the result of having spent 27 years on active duty, knowing that I wanted to be in control of my decisions, to control the outcomes that I wanted to control, and not having anybody tell me no. So when I retired after 27 years on active duty, I decided that becoming an entrepreneur was my path. I looked at government contracting and I did some due diligence, I did some research, and the more I learned about it, the more I realized that I was not ready to go down that path. So I decided to do something different. I went into a couple of other businesses and I built those for a while, finally exited those. And one of the things that I realized was that there's this stage of business, which I call the pre-profitability stage, where business owners don't have people, they don't have money, they don't have knowledge, and yet they're out there fighting day after day after day after day. So what I did was I took my 20 plus years of strategy development work when I was on active duty. I spent 16 out of my 27 years at higher headquarters level, and 9 out of those I was in joint billets, so strategic command, J5 at the Pentagon, European Command, Central Command is where I retired. I took that and I tried to apply it to small business. It didn't work. So I went down this journey, which included my PhD, to identify how does a business owner in the pre-profitability stage gain traction, get to a point where they have some control over what they're doing. And it's become an obsession for me. So what I'm going to share in this programming yourself to succeed may be some things that you hadn't heard before. And what I would ask you to do is bounce them against the things that you have heard and see if any of them will enable you to be in more control, to be intentional, to be purposeful, to be strategic in your thinking. And one of the things I like to say is we need to think smarter before we work harder. And we all work hard, and we all know that we have to work hard. But when we take a little bit of time to think smarter, then we will be able to maximize what we're doing. And another favorite word of mine is progression. You should be able to track and measure your movement from where you are to where you want to be. So I'm going to jump into that pretty quickly. And I have some definitions that I'm going to share with you. And again, these definitions may be different than what you've heard. They may be the same as what you've heard, but consider them for the value, and I will tell you that they work. So again, strategy and organization is my strength. Strategy development and organization design is what I deliver. So my definition of strategy, and this is not mine, I didn't create it. It came out of different things that I've studied even when I was going through the PhD program. The definition of strategy that is simple to apply or simplest to apply is how to get from where you are to where you want to be. 3 very key and critical components: the way you want to be piece, the way you are piece, and then connecting the dots. Strategy development then is thinking as far ahead as you possibly can with information you have while continually conducting research to learn more about the problems, people, product pricing, and processes that go into that. So strategy development is just a continuous activity that you execute as you go down the path. Organization, I have three components to it. The first one is finding what you need when you need it. So my office is a mess, but I know where all the pieces are in that mess. So if I need to find something, I know where it is and I can go get it. If my wife comes in here and cleans it up and makes it all neat, I become disorganized because now I know where nothing is and I can't find it when I need it. Knowing what to do and when to do it is the second one. Very simple to say, but very difficult to apply in action. Knowing what to do and when to do it. And I have a map process that I use that enables you to be able to see that on a visual scale. And then the third one is steady progress in small increments using a proven process. And I had a client this morning ask me, where do you find proven processes? You find them in the books, you find them in the podcast, you find them in conversations that you have with people about the questions that you have. But once you've mapped out your strategy to know how to get from where you are to where you want to be, then you know how to ask questions, how to ask the right questions and who to ask those questions of. And so then organization development is building the framework that enables you to coordinate and communicate. At its very core level, what is going to make you successful in business is the ability to coordinate and to communicate. So some of those things may be new and different. Some of those may be things you've heard before. However they fit, that's great. So I'm going to jump into another set of definitions very quickly. And my PhD study was focused on business fundamentals because as I began to look at what the challenges were and how to simplify the complexity, going back to Jenny's pointing out that Emily and I both played basketball. When I played basketball, if you couldn't dribble, pass, and shoot, you can't play the game at the very basic level. Now, there are advanced fundamentals like defense and rebounding and some other things that constitute the game. But at the very basic, if you can't dribble, pass, and shoot, you can't play. So I had this thought, what is it in business that if you can't do, you can't play the game? So that was part of my study. And I'm going to offer these for your consideration. The three things that I found through my study, and I studied 75 business owners who started out with zero, built their companies to $100 million in annual revenue. And I looked at them in the pre-profitability stage. What did every single one of them do to position themselves so they could have that kind of success at the other end? And it had to be that everyone did it. So if one person succeeded to that level and didn't do it, then it didn't qualify as a basic business fundamental. So here are the three that I came up with out of that study. So it's not me making it up, it's what emerged. Business fundamental number one is selling. Business fundamental number two is cultivating relationships. And business number three is research. Now, one of the criteria was that these business fundamentals had to be simple. So when you hear them, you go, of course, and that is what they are. But you wouldn't believe how many people don't apply these basic business fundamentals to their business. So I talk a little bit about that. Selling is not the idea of becoming a professional salesperson. It's understanding the problem you solve, the solution you provide, and how you package that as a product with an appropriate price that makes sense for both you and for the person who is purchasing that product. And then, so that's what I call selling. It's not persuading people. It's not convincing people. It's not taking no for an answer. It's creating win-win situations. And you can do that within your personality and within the scope and frame of how you deliver your services. You just have to understand what the problem is and how you deliver that and then how you price and package that. And it becomes a lot easier. I hate sales, but I'm pretty good at closing deals. Cultivating relationships is the second one. You've heard that over and over and over and over in these things. And those of you who are in business know that that's the core. Is no secret about that. If you can't cultivate relationships, you can't really play the game of business because business is social and small business is primarily social. And then the last one is research. Research, when I took a look at the research aspect that was emerging from this study, was that it was actually resourcefulness. But one of the criteria I had was that it had to be teachable and learnable. Resourcefulness is something that emerges from being able to do good research. And when you're doing good research, that has to do with sources. Where do you find your information? Contacts, who do you talk to when you need to have some information that's going to move you forward? So that is the basic foundation and the framework of what I consider to be the strategy approach, the strategic thinking approach that can help you think smarter before you begin to work harder. So again, if you have any questions or comments or thoughts about what you're hearing on here, feel free to put a comment into the chat, and I'll be happy to address those as we go along. In terms of the book, I had 3 chapters. The first one was called Personal Development for Government Contracting. And again, business and the government are one and the same. They are aligned and they are tied together. So I talk about this all the time. In order to do business with the government, you have to have a functioning business. The government is not the government. It is the people in the government have problems that need to be solved. And so you need to connect with the agencies and the services within those entities that are going to help you build the type of relationships that you need moving forward. There are some companies out there that have built some tremendously profitable businesses by just focusing on one agency or even one sub-agency. And the reason that works, again, from a strategic perspective, is if you build relationships with the folks in that sub-agency, you understand what their problems are, you shape and build your company to meet those specific problems, you grow your company as you are able to take on some of the more challenging projects that they have, then you become the trusted person, you become the trusted company, you become the go-to, and you also have information available to you about what's coming down the pipe that others don't have. Some of these contracts run 5 years and they're recompeted 5 years. So let's say you're the one who wins that contract, you're in there for 5 years, you're delivering good service, you're continuing to build that relationship. When that contract comes around again for recompete, that agency doesn't want anyone but you. So you're going to be the front runner, you're going to be in a strong position to get that, and then you'll have some stability with the revenue streams that are coming into your business. So from a strategic standpoint, again, that's thinking smarter before you work harder. So in terms of the personal development, you can take a look at the NAICS codes and say, wow, there's a lot of things here that I can do, but what would work better, I think, is if you say, this is what I do, this is my strength, this is my talent, this is where I can deliver high quality value, and then you just go in and pick that narrow set of NAICS codes that you can use to fulfill. So there were 5 things that came out of the personal development for GovCon chapter. And the first one was assess. You want to embrace your strengths and use those when you are looking at the government contracts. You want to reflect. You want to connect your talent to the need or want that the government will pay you to fulfill. You want to educate. Let them know what you do, how you do it, become a professional, master your craft, and then certify. At that point, then it makes sense to get the proof that you have what it takes to perform. And you do that in a very purposeful way. So as Emily mentioned when she was on, getting an 8A certification before you have a sense of how you're going to leverage that certification might result in you wasting a lot of time. So you have 9 years on that contract, you know, you come in with a good background, a good product, a good service, a good delivery of value, and you connect with someone who can be a good mentor for your company, and then you'll be able to have the conversations that will lead you forward to maximizing your 8A time before you graduate. And then the last one is the basic business fundamental. You have to sell. And you have to let the potential customers know that you're available to make their lives better. And every contracting officer has a report card. They need to get these contracts filled with people who are going to deliver. And if the company is going to fail, then that's a problem for them. So they want to be able to work with those folks that they know are going to deliver on those contracts. So that was one of the chapters, personal development for government contract. First, look inside. Who are you? What do you do? How do you build your team? How do you deliver services? How do you solve the problems of the government? And when you think of it from that perspective, you start asking the right questions. And as long as you're asking the right questions, then you're eventually going to come to the right answers that enable you to succeed in government contracting. And I like to use a basic, we talk about capability statements and we talk about business plans. And I like to talk about business model. And what I mean by business model is connecting the most profitable a product with your most profitable customer, and then that will equal a revenue generating activity. And if you are focused in on your most profitable product and your most profitable customer, then you're going to ask the right questions and come up with the right answers. And if you hadn't heard me say that before, you're going to ask the right questions. And sometimes that's more important than trying to figure out what the right answers are on your own. So that's one of the chapters that I covered in the book. So we'll go on to the second one. I don't see any questions or comments in the chat, so we'll go on to the second one. And in this one, it's product development for GovCon. Again, reiterating, so I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly. It's reiterating some of the things that we've already talked about. But one of the reasons I reiterate this is because when you're being intentional and you're being purposeful, that means that you have some type of a framework that you can go back to when things break. And I'm going to go back to my basketball analogy. I was not a natural basketball player. I had to learn the skills. You know, I were guys on my street who could just shoot the ball and it would go in. And I never knew how they did that because when I would shoot the ball, it would go everywhere but in. So I had to break it down and I had to learn the mechanics. And I grabbed a book and I read the book about how to shoot a basketball and what are the mechanics of it. Later on, and I became a pretty good shooter over time. Later on, when I became a coach, because I had to go through that process, I could teach kids how to shoot a basketball. And of course, there were those who would say, well, I don't want to do it that way because I can shoot and my shots go in. And I would tell them, well, that's fine. But when you grow and things change and it's no longer working naturally, what are you going to fix? How are you going to know where you need to correct? But if you have the ability to understand the mechanics, then you can know what to fix. And so when we go into product development for GovCon, there are 5 things in the mechanics that I want you to understand. The first one, we've talked about it over and over. Number 1, identify the problem. Number 2, match your solution to that problem. Number 3, package the solution as a program. When you package it as a program, now people know how you solve that problem and you can put an appropriate price on it, which is number 4. And then the last piece is then you can present the package competitively. And so those are some of the things that I talk about in the second chapter, and I just wanted to lay those out so that you would have that information available to you.
Hey, Russ, I got a question.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, you've covered so many things, and I think what's so good about your teaching style is you always give like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And I also like the way you alliterate this, purposely profitable. One of the things that we all go through as we're in business is wanting to find out, how do I make money? And then you start going around the thing, well, if I sell X, I could make money if I sell this. And what you're also talking about is taking action and moving forward and just saying, I will figure it out when I get there. I know that you talk about strategy, but what you've really shown me is how to the first thing is figure out where you overall want to get to, but how do you get to the next level? Just like your basketball analogy. Do you mind just talking a little bit more about that? Because product development is so important. And people are like, well, if I painted it yellow, would people buy it? If I turned it upside down, you know, how do you do that in terms of that product development side?
Yeah, I mean, that's very, you know, you hit the nail on the head there because, you know, we fall in love with our product. When we figure out what we can do and what we can do really well, then we want to polish it up and we want to shine it up and we want to make it pretty. But if you're not connecting that to your customer and getting the customer input on what those changes mean in terms of relieving their struggle, then you're going to present it to them and they're going to go, well, that's not real valuable to me. It's not helping me. So this has to be a collaboration. And business, as I mentioned earlier, is social, and cultivating relationships is business fundamental number 2. So this all a conversation. And this is what GovCon Summit is all about. It's about making these connections and building these relationships. But when you go into when you come into a place like GovCon Summit, you want to be able to describe to people what you deliver in terms of value. in such a way. So when you have a strategy and you simply sat down and thought about what your journey and what your path could look like, now you can have those types of conversations. And I always say in the beginning, it's an artificial construct because you don't know everything, but you know some things. So you put those things down. And then as you walk your path, you begin to get more clarity. You begin to put more realism into the types of things that you do. Your end goal doesn't change, but you might refine it or tweak it just a little bit. You really don't want to change the anchor too much, because if you do that, now you lose your directionality. So that's, it gives you that intention when you can put it into some type of a framework. And that's why I like the alliteration. That's why I like the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because you can write those on your wall and you can ask yourself, which of these did I work on today? Which of these is the most important thing for me to do today? And that's why, I like to take that approach.
Well, I think you've got a really good approach. We have a good question from Allie and Elliot, and I'm just going to read it. I love the product development information. My question is, how do you develop, market, and sell that product when there are barriers like facility clearances and past performance? Now, this comes up a lot inside government contracting, especially for small business, because as we were talking about, it sounds really easy, but then once you're working with a specific agency, you've got to meet the requirements of what they're doing. And I'll give you an example that Alan may be thinking of. Alan's a cyber and IT guy. So he's probably got something that has to do with cybersecurity or IT that he wants to market. And when he's wanting to market that to a particular agency, say Homeland Security or Department of Army, they're going to say, well, do you have a facility security clearance? Part of that question is that if you don't already have one, they would have to find a way to get you a facility security clearance, which is a lot of paperwork for anybody. And nobody's going to take the chance or take the effort or take the time unless you've got a viable product. You can't prove you're a viable product because you can't talk to them. I hear this all the time. Past performance is the same thing. If I'm a subcontractor, that doesn't really count very much as past performance. It counts a little, but it doesn't, they're going to say, well, you want to sell something to the Army. What have you sold to the Army before? And you're like, I haven't yet because you guys won't even talk to me. Emily, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, let me address this because I don't know if Emily was ready for this, but this is a question that is one of the reasons why I am so strong a believer in strategy, because you do have to figure out all of these complex challenges. And if you don't have some type of a mental framework for addressing those challenges, then it just becomes frustrating. So I'm going to use an analogy of my son. He was 12 years old and decided he wanted to go to an Ivy League school. And he had his heart set on going to Columbia University. And one day he comes to me and he says, hey, Dad, I need to take the SAT 2s. Now, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, so I don't know what it takes to get into an Ivy League school. I took the SATs, but I never heard of SAT 2s. I had no clue what those were. But what he'd done is he went and looked at the qualifications and the criteria for getting into an Ivy League school, and it said he had to have SAT 2s in English and in math. And so he came to me and told me, this is what I need to move to the next step in my journey, in my path. These are the types of things that we come up against even when we're in business. There are going to be things that we are not prepared for, but we don't know what they are until we either run up against that obstacle by trying to get a contract that we're not necessarily prepared for, or somebody tells us. This is what GovCon Summit is all about, is you came here to hear about the things that you don't know about so that you can then prepare in a strategic way. And then when you do go apply for that contract, you know that, okay, I knew I needed to have that. So I made sure I got it before I applied for that contract and before I walked down that path. Now, to Alan's point, if you don't have it, yeah, you just have to go back and get it. And that takes time. And the other thing I say about strategy is strategy gives you patience. In addition to being able to map out where you want to be, then you can begin to ask the right questions and get qualified before you go apply. Now you can, so let's take the example of if we talked about the $50 million contract. So let's take the example of you say, you know what, at some point in the future, I would love to win a $50 million contract with the government. So what I would do from a strategic perspective is I would go look at a $50 million contract and see what the requirements were in that contract. And then I would list all those things out, and then I would backtrack and say, okay, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have that. That's going to take me 2 years to get. So I better get started now so that I can make sure that I have that by the time I'm ready to put in for that type of a contract. So it gives you the ability to organize your thinking process, organize your preparation, and preparation for me is huge. Nothing is more important than preparation, but you have to know what you're preparing for.
Oh, Russ, that is a perfect example, because when we were talking earlier about these GWACs, government-wide and best in class, there weren't rules published on these. So what they keep doing is they keep raising the qualifications, and you don't know about it, so you can't have prepared ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good example, facility clearance, trying to get that and past performance. What you can do, though, is team up with other people that have that. And it's sometimes hard to team up with people because you'll say, well, they don't understand my product. Why should I give them 50%? Why should I do this? But that's part of the game of GovCon, is figuring out how you can get there, because otherwise it's like, if there's a barrier of a facility security clearance and you realize that you're not going to be able to get to that anytime soon, then maybe you want to take a different path, but it doesn't mean you couldn't put that facility security clearance down on, that's going to be my 2023 goal. And that way you're taking that hurdle out of the way. But what can I do? What can I do now?
Exactly. And that's perfect, Amy, because the question, Jenny, because the question then becomes, instead of, I hope I can, the question becomes, how can I? I want to win this. How can I? And you're right about, at some point, you may look at this path and say, not only can I not get there from here, I don't even want to. And then you start looking at those areas where you are really motivated and excited and say, I would love to do a contract with the Air Force, because everybody loves to do contracts with the Air Force, right? So I'm not going to go after these Army contracts anymore. I'm going to go after the Air Force one. And you may have a different set of criteria that you have to meet when you go after those contracts, but it helps you make decisions about what is most valuable to you and what is not. And so this goes to business fundamental number 3, which is research. And research helps you then to become resourceful, because like you mentioned, you know what, I don't have past performance. I don't have this sort of facilities certification. How can I? Back to that same question. How can I get that? Oh, maybe I can team with somebody. Oh, maybe I can do this. Oh, you know what? I don't even want to get to that point for 3 years. So let me just start working on it. So now your resourcefulness kicks in, and there's no better asset in your company than resourcefulness, because you're going to hit up on obstacles all the time, like COVID. Who anticipated COVID? But do you know how many, I mean, Doc Wright might tell you coming up how many amazing things he did when COVID and social distancing hit, and he started looking and saying, okay, well, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. But then he said, how can I do this? How can I continue to fulfill the mission that I promised to fulfill to the people who depend upon me? And just reading the book, the list of things that they did in a very short period of time will blow your mind. But it was because he was resourceful. It was because he had a strategy. He knew what he wanted his company to look like, and all he then had to do was connect the dots. He could see when it was going off track, and he could make corrections to get himself back on track and moving in the right direction.
Can I say something? I think that this applies too to what I'm learning in that mental fitness coaching program, and that what I coach on is our saboteurs, which are on our left side of our brain, you know, like your stickler or somebody that, you know, your victim, you know, oh, COVID, woe is me. Those are all, they motivate you by negativity. And then on our right side of our brain, we have our sage, you know, which is curiosity. What benefit could come out of this? How could I do this? You know, the questions we ask ourselves, lead to the answers. Like one of my coaches said, whatever you put in Google search, is going to give you an answer back. So if you search on some broad term, you're going to get like a whole bunch of answers back. If you're really specific, what can I do to get that security clearance? What steps can I take, instead of asking, why can't I get a security clearance? And then if you pay attention to, like Russ was saying, your body language, I was telling him that certain tasks, this is why I didn't necessarily want to be consulting in the small business realm anymore, because it's just like makes me, I get constricted. Whereas when I think about coaching and mental fitness and some of the other stuff I'm doing, I'm like, yes, I want to do that. So if you're not like, yes, this is so awesome about government contracting, really think hard about it, because that yes is what's motivating you to keep going.
Yeah, and there are two aspects to everything we do in business. There's the money aspect, and then there's the meaningfulness in terms of what we do. And when we put money at the forefront and we start chasing the dollars, at some point it becomes unfulfilling. And you really say, you know what, I just don't want to get up in the morning and do this anymore. The money's great, but it's killing me. I have no quality of life. If you pursue meaningfulness of your business, but you're not getting the revenue coming in as a result of what you love to do, then it becomes unsustainable, because you can't grow your business without revenue. You can't put food on your table without money. So you have to understand and work the balance of both simultaneously. And that's what the idea behind personal development and product development ends up being. Okay, personally, I want to be able to accomplish these things with my business. Financially, I need to have a product that solves a problem for which people are willing to pay me what I need to be paid in order to grow my company. So that is a perfect description of what it is that you're talking about. But it also, the last thing I want to say here is it's also about being proactive. What you said, Emily, is that too, we're sometimes so often reactive to what's happening outside of us that we become a bit frustrated and discouraged. But when you can be proactive, then you're taking control. And again, the limit though is you have to control the controllable. And when you can map out and see how to get from where you are to where you want to be, that gives you the ability to see what's controllable and what is not controllable and make adjustments accordingly.
Yeah, that's another thing that I coach on is like, we're always, a lot of us, we were conditioned and we're taught to look at circumstances, COVID. Well, once this happens, once my kids graduate from college, once this happens, once that happens, then I can be happy, then I can do this. When really, and we think that our thoughts are related to those circumstances. We can control our thoughts. We can catch our thoughts. That's what this mental fitness is, and bring it back to, no, I'm going down the saboteur side, the negativity side. I'm going to catch that. And it's not that once COVID is gone, things will be better, or once I get this contract, things will be better. Things can be good right now. And our thoughts generate our emotions, and our subconscious mind is basically an extension of our body, and our subconscious mind acts by emotion. So our thoughts generate, what's going on in our subconscious mind, which generates our feelings, which generates our actions, which generates our results. Mm-hmm. So what are you thinking? And is it based on circumstances, or are you choosing to have that curiosity and to ask the right questions so that you can get the results that you're really going after?
Yeah, and results and outcomes are really the key, because I'm also a believer in self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you have established the results that you're looking for and the outcomes that you are planning on, then it becomes a little easier for you to set the milestones that have to happen to get from where you are to that point. So I want to throw in one last piece here, and it's another framework, and it's a framework that I've used very successfully for management. In the military, we have our leadership styles, and the leadership styles in many cases have to do with giving someone a task to do and then making sure that they do that task. And that became stressful for me, because I was like, I have all these people, And I don't want to have to chase them all day long. It's exhausting. So how can I turn this around so that they are able to perform at their highest levels, that they're able to come to work and deliver what they need to deliver without me having to ride herd on them? And so I started that. And when I got to my last assignment as Chief of Policy Division at Central Command, I came up with this framework, which I'm going to share. This may not be the framework for you. It worked very well for me. But what I would encourage you is to have some type of a management framework that enables you and your people to communicate effectively when it comes to getting things done. So the framework is 6 things. It's product, process, sources, contacts, initiative, and creativity. And I'm going to talk about those very briefly. So the product is, what are your deliverables? What are the expectations from you in the position that you hold? And so when I had someone come in and I assigned them to the Iraq desk, for example, I had an expectation that they were going to be the expert on whatever was happening in Iraq. And if there was a problem, they would bring it to my attention. The next thing, which that leads into, is the process. So you have a major or lieutenant colonel who has come up with this problem that exists in the AOR somewhere, and the 4-star general needs to know about it. Well, how does it get from the lieutenant colonel's desk to the 4-star general's desk? There's a process, and you all know that there's a process, and there's staff summary sheets, or if you're at the Pentagon, it's called a JSAP, or if you're at Central, at the European Command, it was called the 915, but there's always this paperwork trail that you have to use, and that's the process. And I would tell my people, use the process and know the process. That's not my job. I've been there, done that. You need to understand the process, and if the process is not working, figure out how to go over it, under it, around it, or through it. And if that can't happen, then you come to me. I'll go 06 to 06, and if I can't get it done 06 to 06, I'll go to the 07, and they can go 07 to 07 to try to figure it out. The third thing then was sources. Where do you go for relevant information? What do you read? If you can only read one thing, what is it? And then contacts. Who do you speak to for relevant information? And some people you better not talk to because they always give you bad information. So you have to understand the quality of your source. And that leads to the last 2, initiative and creativity. Once you have those 4 things, you can take initiative. And I wanted them to take initiative to know the whens, the wheres, and the hows, and the limits of what actions they could take. And then we could have conversations around those actions. And then that ignited creativity. So when they came to me with a problem, they also needed to come to me with a couple of different solutions that they think might be a resolution of that problem, and start that conversation. What it was doing was it was activating their resourcefulness. And then the last thing I told them is, if you come to work and at the end of the day, you don't feel like you learned something to grow personally and professionally, or you made a significant contribution to our mission, the mission of the policy division, then we need to have a conversation, because you should never go home at the end of the day feeling like it was a waste of your time. So that's a framework that I used. I used it very effectively. There came a point in time when I was sitting at my desk with virtually nothing to do because everybody was functioning at a high level. But then I realized that my job was to be a strategic thinker, and I began to put my efforts and my energies towards, okay, what's the next thing? Where are we going in the long run? And how do we continue to position this division to make sure we're delivering to the general officers what they need to make the decisions they need to make, and keep them ahead of the curve? So now they're not being reactive. They can be proactive because the policy division has done its job.
Well, Russ, this sounds like working on the business instead of in the business.
Well, I believe in both, Jenny, and I use an analogy. I have a lot of analogies too, in addition to alliterations. But we don't buy a house to work on the house. We buy a business. We buy a house because we want to live in the house, and we want to enjoy living in the house. And it's the same thing with our business. We want to do that thing in our business that brings us joy, that enables us to help people. But the reality is that we cannot work in our business unless we worked effectively on our business. But once our business structures and frameworks and systems and processes are in place, then a majority of those run themselves. And so it goes back to the analogy, to the example that I just gave at Central Command, which was, once I was able to use my management mastery model to get my people functioning at their highest levels, now my work on the business or my work on the division was essentially done, and we could all enjoy working in the business and doing what it was that we were was most fulfilling for us on a daily basis. It shouldn't be any different in your business. And you've worked with Solvability, and you've built the game plan, the roadmap, and that is a structure and a framework that helps you to maintain focus on where your clients are, to have conversations with them where you are. That is a tremendous framework for being able to be effective. So that's some work that you've done on the business, but because you did that work on the business, now you get to enjoy having conversations while you're in the business. So oh, you're in the traction phase, or you're in the acceleration phase, or you're here, and this is what we need to work on, and this is what we need to do to get you where you need to be. And those are the fun conversations to have. And that's when you get to work in your business.
Well, and Russ, it has such of an impact when I can give people a better idea of where they are, and then you can spend some time with them saying, I know it seems impossible, but let's just put it down. And I love it when you would show me your mission mindset or any of those. Would you mind sharing one of your cheats? I should have asked you this before.
One of my...
Oh, just the mission mapping or some of those, one of those tools that you show people how to show they're making progress.
Oh, let me see if I can pull one up here pretty quickly.
So I guess I want you guys to know that Russ is really a person that's transformed what I was doing for GovCon Summit into being able to do this as a virtual event. At the end of April last year, Emily and Russ and I started this thing called Freedom Friday because we knew we wanted to stay in touch with the people that had been at previous GovCons. And it wasn't until we started to figure out how to do it. And the way I figured out how to do it was by not doing it very well to begin with. And I think that's one of the things that Russ is really talking about is like, set some intention, move in some kind of direction. Doesn't mean that you're going to have to go all the way down that path. You're going to say, well, I'm pretty good at shooting. I got to get back to dribbling because I keep bouncing on my toe. It hurts.
Yes. So I think, yes, I'll pull this one up. So see if I can share my screen here. Hopefully I can. Yes.
Yes. This is the mastery that is Russ.
Yes. So just in case you haven't picked up from this conversation, I am a very left brain thinker, very analytic, very structured, very framework oriented, very outcomes oriented. And that's because it gives me so much time to do so many things. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule. And I say, if I can spend 20% of my effort on this project and get to 80% solution, then I can essentially do 5 of those in a day. I get a lot done because I believe organization overcomes limitations, strategy reduces uncertainty and anxiety, and these sorts of things. And I apply them in a way that tries to make it easier for everyone to be able to use this. So this is the milestone map that Jenny was talking about. And what this essentially does is it enables you to sit down and think through the various challenges in an organized way before you actually begin to take those actions. So you have your starting point, you have your ending point, what does success look like and what measures will tell you that you succeeded. And then your questions become, what actions represent steps along your path? There's programs that you can structure in. If I have 4 different programs, I can put them in some type of priority order. Or you can say phases. I'm going to create a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, a phase 4, and then I'm going to get to my outcome at the end of phase 4. You can use time. You can say, in 30 days, I'm going to do this, in 60 days, in 90 days, in 120 days. So there's very different ways you can structure this. And that's what I call structure without restriction, because now you are the one who is in control of what you put on this map. And then there's below the line. So this is the above the line stuff. This is the high strategic thinking. And then below the line, what supports those actions. So if I have an action for marketing, above the line, I have to do marketing. Then below the line, I can have website, I can have social media, I can have advertising, I can have, a variety of different things. And now I have an idea of what it's going to take to fulfill that particular step and move it on to the next. The other beauty about this is it doesn't have to work from left to right. If you're looking at somewhere down the road on this map and you go, you know what, I can do that right now today. You don't have to wait until you get there. If an opportunity comes available and you have the resources and the time, do it now. And then you just turn it green. I got it done. So this is a worksheet. And the other beauty of this is that once you map this thing out, even though it's an artificial construct to start out with, you can you ask yourself the question, what has to happen to get from start to finish? Again, that's a very proactive question. What has to happen for me to get from the start to the finish? And then when you feel overwhelmed, you can then just say, you know what, I don't have to worry about getting to the finish. What has to happen to get me from point 1 to point 2? And on those days when you have a plate full and you can just look at your map and say, you know what, I just need to do this. I like to use the analogy again of making a trip from New York to Florida. If I'm going to make a trip from New York to Florida, I know where I'm going. And I know that I can take I-95 to get from New York to Florida. I know there's going to be detours. I know I may run into rain. I know it may get, dark out, but I can adjust to all these things because I have a destination in mind and I know where I'm going. So this helps you think it through. That's all it does, is it just helps you think it through. Some people, I tell people also, you don't have to use this structure. You don't have to use this framework or format. I know there are some people who like the mind map, approach. So they'll take what I have when we sit down, they'll take that and then they'll convert it into a mind map. And because a mind map makes more sense to their brain, then they're able to execute. Because at the end of the day, you have to execute. And you're only going to execute on those things that fit your personality, that fit your lifestyle. Because again, if they don't, then you're just going to say, you know what, I'm not doing it. Nobody can make me do anything I don't want to do, and I'm not doing it. And that's the end of the story. And you then have to accept the fact that you're not going to get to your desired outcomes. And I don't want to see that for anybody. I want to see people get to their desired outcomes.
Well, I think that's a great, so what do you think about, let's pull everybody back in and have a group call, let people ask questions with their video on. You okay with that?
Oh, sure.
All right. Well, so everybody turn on your cameras and open your mics. And I'd love to have some questions from the group. Allie and Elliot, you've got some great questions. I know that another person we've got in here I'd love to hear from is Akinwande. I don't know if he can talk now. And there's Tracy. So you've been and gotten your hair done, right, Tracy? So I don't know if you guys know Tracy, but I would say she's an unmanned systems expert and with many years in with the Navy, and she's now helping people with their innovation approaches. And Tracy, glad that you've been able to join a lot of this call. I know you like tools. So I think what you were saying is you really like his mind map or his mission mapping, right, Tracy? She's driving. I think she can only.
I do, and I like the one that Chris used as well. I thought, I'll have to go back and listen to the recording so that I can track down what they were. But I thought those tools were great, and yeah, I'm always happy to share tools, but even happier to get new ones. Thank you.
All right. Well, great.
It must kind of be an Air Force thing because he was talking about intentionality, and that's the word that I apply. And maybe it's a later thing because I was a B-52 radar navigator in the early part of my career, so very much in the aviation community. And the other thing about this is, I always say, if we had to use trial and error to protect now national defense, we'd be, speaking another language and running somebody else's government. And so this idea of intentionality and purpose and, setting a desired outcome is inherent in what we did in the military, because we couldn't lose, we couldn't fail. We had to make decisions towards some desired outcome, which was freedom and which was national security.
I agree completely, Russ, but I will disappoint you in letting you know that I am Navy, not Air Force.
Well, I was just talking about me and Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's why I say, at the military, it's military in general that and that's where I think we come together in terms of the services overall. I spent 9 years in joint. So I learned the cultures, the histories, the background, the mindsets of the other services. And I understand why, certain mindsets exist. And I loved it. I absolutely loved my 9 years in joint service. I was a joint staff officer.
Great. Hey, we've got Q coming in. And so I met met her on LinkedIn, and I think you're going to build a spacecraft. Is that correct, Q?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that for me?
Well, we met on LinkedIn, and I was reading through your profile, and you've got big ideas, and I think you should build us a spaceship.
Well, I am operating in the transportation industry, so when the opportunity presents itself, we will have that spaceship. That's one of my goals, to work alongside Elon Musk.
I knew it was something to do with space, and that would have to be what it was. But I see that you've got a book behind you. Have you been reading it?
I have. So I have my GovCon book. And as soon as you talked about the left coast, right coast, I had to go and find that chapter about left coast, right coast, so I can go and make sure when I answer this prime that I'm having the right strategy in place. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad it's going to help you. And so we've only got a few more minutes. I would love to see if anybody else has any other questions. But Russ, you've done a great job as usual, just kind of explaining the whole part of mindset and strategy and planning. And that's really the main reason that we knew that you had to be a part of this team is, you got to have a leader up in front that says, I know where we're going, and here's how you can follow me, and here's what I need from you. And without having that, it's very hard to move forward. But the whole idea of our GovCon community is to create a coaching community where you can find peers and mentors and coaches and answers, resources and relationships. And so I just love having the opportunity to be on with both Russ and Melanie talking about. So Russ, any other remarks, or how should people reach you?
Yes, so the first remark is I want to make sure that I put this in context, because some of you folks out there who are incredibly experienced in business may look at these frameworks and not feel that it was kind of up to the level of where you are, and that's okay. The area that I serve are those business owners in the pre-profitability stage. So these are things that make their life so much easier because they don't know what you know. Again, coming back to GovCon Summit, the idea is for us to share, and those things that you kind of take for granted because you've been through the school of hard knocks and you figured it out and learned it the long way and the hard way. I did the same. Many of these things that I talk about are because I struggled and I suffered and I dealt with the pain. And I said, this category of business owner needs my help. So in some cases, when you look at these basic business fundamentals and these basic strategies and these basic frameworks, even if you're experienced, you might want to go back and say, let me apply that and see if I've covered all my bases. And you might find that it makes what you're doing right now a little bit easier. So I wanted to share that and put it into a context, because what you're going to get next is you're going to start getting some of the more advanced strategies and some of the more advanced approaches and some of the more detailed things that you need to apply to your business. And so some of those of you who are more advanced in your progress will begin to find that as a tremendous value. But thank you, Jenny, for pulling this whole thing together, and the team, and Emily, and Doc, who's going to come up next and who's going to wow you, and Josh and Michael. It's been tremendous. So thanks for that opportunity. And thank you for all of you who are here attending, learning and sharing and contributing to this community, because this is only going to grow and get better. And you're kind of here making it happen as well.
Oh, absolutely. Alan Elliott asked one last question. Is GovCon expert on Audible? I'm like, no, not yet. But we are really wanting to focus our training through this next year on those chapters of the book. So we really focus on the learning part of that. So thanks everybody.
I'm going to out Alan here. Alan said that in the game of basketball, he beat me 11-3. So I said no shutout. He said that would be disrespectful. But I'm not above shutout, brother.
All right.
11-0.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off because we've got Eric Dockerite coming up in the next 4 minutes. So I'll see y'all in just a few minutes.